It's been a few years. I don't have a clear memory of this game anymore. But you know what? I can handle this. After all, I beat Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, I beat Mega Man and Bass, I made it through most of Ghosts and Goblins. Okay, Super Meat Boy, give it your best. When I put Super Meat Boy in my Twitter poll, who knows how long ago, I hadn't fully taken into account the game's difficulty. But in all fairness, the more difficult the game is, the funnier it is for the people watching me play, I guess, so alright. Super Meat Boy's origins actually begin on Newgrounds, with a Flash game, rest in peace Flash player, designed by Edmund McMillan and Jonathan McEntee over the course of 3 weeks and released in 2008 under the title Meat Boy. It served as the groundwork for what would become the superized version we'll cover later. Development of Super Meat Boy began when McMillan was approached by both Nintendo and Microsoft, who were impressed with his games and asked him to make a new game for their then new services WiiWare and Xbox Live Arcade. McMillan, who was working with Tommy Refanes on another Flash game called Gray Matter, thought about designing a sequel to one of two other games he worked on, those being Aether and Gish. But he and Refanes decided to become Team Meat and develop a sequel to Meat Boy instead. That, of course, became Super Meat Boy, which was announced for release in early 2010 for WiiWare and PC. Then a release for Xbox Live Arcade was announced, and would be first in order to be part of the 2010 Fall Game Feast promotion. Then the WiiWare version was dropped because the game got too big for Nintendo's strict size limitations, and for some reason they weren't allowed to release it on PlayStation 3? The game was finished in late 2010, but the last few months were beyond stressful for the two. According to Indie Game The Movie, they worked off 5 hours of sleep each night, and would often forget to eat. That sounds horrible! But their effort to make the game as best as it could did pay off, as Super Meat Boy has become one of the more renowned indie games out there. After its initial release for Windows and Xbox 360, the game would go on to be ported to macOS, Linux, PS4, and PS Vita, as well as Wii U, and recently Nintendo Switch. I will be playing the macOS version for this video, which should be exactly the same as the PC version. I don't get why this message that the controller is recommended keeps popping up. I see no issue playing on the keyboard. And I probably just lost 60 subscribers by saying that. The story here is that we have Meat Boy. There's also Bandage Girl, who loves Meat Boy. And he loves her. Dr. Fetus hates Meat Boy, and as a result hates us, the people playing the game. Because of his unhinged hatred of Meat Boy, Dr. Fetus kidnaps Bandage Girl, prompting Meat Boy to go after him. Along the way, Dr. Fetus tries to use his insane creations to kill Meat Boy, but most of them end up backfiring. Such creations include his Little Slugger robot, Blood Monster Chad, Little Horn, based on Meat Boy's corpses, and Brownie, a clone of Meat Boy made out of— Ugh, what the heck? That's just gross! After facing all of Dr. Fetus's traps, he himself chases Meat Boy through a very dangerous obstacle course, ending with Fetus's life support system being destroyed. Fetus attempts his "watch out, he's up to something" by blowing up the facility, but Meat Boy and the rescued Bandage Girl are rescued by Brownie, and they lived happily ever after. Or did they? According to McMillan and Refanes, Super Meat Boy was designed as a throwback to hardcore NES games with huge difficulty spikes, with the developers citing examples such as Ghosts and Goblins, Mega Man, and, go figure, Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels. It shows very clearly in the game design. You will be tested on how well you can avoid the various dangers that lurk in the stages. That would include buzzsaws, meat-seeking rockets, spikes, crumbling ground, all those things I said before on conveyors, and salt.
Hey, I said no salt!
The whole game revolves around the trial and error mentality. Most of the levels are small, some of them not even having scrolling segments, and there's no life system. When you die, you almost immediately restart back at the beginning so you can try again. Once you do complete a level, a replay shows of every single attempt you made to clear the level at once, to give you an idea of what you learned and how often you fell on your face. The game is ridiculously hard, but never feels unfair. When I died, it always felt like my fault for not noticing something, or for thinking I could get away with something that I clearly couldn't. In terms of progression, you're allowed to tackle the levels in a world in any order you want, but you have to finish a certain number of them to be able to fight the boss of that world. Before each world, before and after each boss, you get a little cutscene, with no dialogue, of Meat Boy and Dr. Fetus's interactions. These are cute and charming at times, and very well animated with a lot of references to classic video games thrown in from time to time. I mean, what did I expect? It's based on a Flash game. Of course the animation's gonna be good. Oh, Ah! Oh gosh, what in the world? Okay, let's take things world by world. World 1 is the forest, where the adventure begins. This is where the game teaches you how the mechanics work. Meat Boy doesn't have much in his moveset. He can walk and run 2 directions, jump, and wall jump. It's not much more complex than Super Mario Bros. In concept, but that makes it easier to work with, and can help present unique challenges down the road. One thing I will compliment the game for out of the gate is how tight Meat Boy's controls are. There are very few moments where I feel like I have no control over him. When you want him to move somewhere, he does. When you want him to jump, he will. It feels great. So remember how I said this game was hard? It happens almost as soon as the first world. Some of these challenges can be bonkers, but it's only a premonition of what will come later. The boss of this world is Lil Slugger, a chainsaw-wielding robot made by Dr. Fetus to destroy Meat Boy once and for all. Considering we have 5 more worlds after this, you can guess how that worked out. Dr. Fetus, in rage, sets the forest on fire, leaving the woodland creatures without homes. World 2 is the hospital. Once you get here, the heat cranks up tremendously and stays hot for the rest of the game. Take this level for instance, where it looked easy at first, but boy did it prove me wrong as I attempted I don't even know how many times to clear it. It was hard, and things only get worse from there. Not only does this world introduce actual enemies that roam around, but also fans and lasers. Keys also become more prominent here as you need to collect them to open locked doors to progress forward. Luckily, because of my expertise of difficult games and my appreciation of the tight controls, I was able to clear most of the game's challenges. Then we reach the boss, which is Chad, the blood monster I mentioned earlier. To defeat him, you simply have to collect all the keys and flood the room with sunlight. That will shrink him so small that Meat Boy can simply punt him away. World 3 is the salt factory. Yes, there's salt everywhere, and Meat Boy hates salt, as I mentioned before. There are some fun gimmicks introduced in this world, including conveyor belts that can launch Meat Boy high into the air, and meat-seeking rockets. Okay, they're not all fun. This world will test your reflexes, and again, it only gets worse from here. You'll be making tons of tight jumps, pinpoint precise wall jumps to avoid chainsaws and salt at the same time, and overall tight maneuvers to get past these obstacles. If you can make it past here without wanting to throw your controller, I salute you. You have more willpower than I do. If I can break to talk about the game's graphics for a moment, I feel the game has the perfect balance of style and practicality. It's easy to tell what's part of the terrain and what's not. Objects are clearly defined, and Meat Boy and Bandage Girl stand out to make them easier to track. I admire that kind of design in a game. It's easy to make everything look as pretty as possible, but then everything stands out, and it's hard to tell what's ground, what's an enemy, and that sort of thing. The visual style is also unique and cartoony. I can't stop thinking of The Binding of Isaac when I see this game. Oh, Edwin McMillan was the artist on that game too. Anyway, the boss of this world is Brownie, the disgusting Meat Boy lookalike created by Dr. Fetus. Before the two can actually fight, however, Dr. Fetus causes a flood of salt to rise from the ground, causing both Meat Boy and Brownie to have to run away. Brownie doesn't hurt you at all, keep a note of this for later. After this, Dr. Fetus knocks Meat Boy out cold and sends to the world 4. I can't come up with an alternate name that's advertiser friendly, even though I'm not monetized. This world is full of lava and even trickier platforming than before, so it goes without saying that players must keep on their toes at all times. New elements include portals that send you to a specific place in the level, and eyeballs that shoot lasers. Then we have my most hated enemy in the game, the Black Maws. These things are like the meat-seeking rockets I mentioned before, but split into 8 tiny rockets when they explode. They didn't give me that much trouble in this world, but they are going to drive me absolutely batty when I get to the later worlds. Also, was that supposed to be a Donkey Kong reference? It's also here that Meat Boy discovers what happens when he dies in every level. Those old bodies fall down here, while he reappears in a new body. Dr. Fetus also realizes this, and utilizes the corpses of Meat Boy attempts gone wrong to create Little Horn, the boss of this world. It's a pattern recognition test, because from what I can gather, Little Horn does the exact same thing every time, so if you play it over and over again, you can beat him no problem. At this point, Dr. Fetus became so frustrated at Meat Boy's victories that he literally causes the apocalypse. Lovely. Going on from that, World 5 is Rapture. Starting with an opening cutscene that looks all too familiar to me as a Mega Man fan, the world takes place in a post-apocalyptic situation. It includes more enemies and more hazards, such as rocket launchers that can shoot 4 ways. Sheesh. There will also be some buttons you have to press to open pathways for you to move forward. If you think the game was hard already, you are not ready for this world. Holy crap, some of these jumps are so tight, it feels like I have a 1 in a million chance of succeeding. The same applies to the boss, Larry's Lament, which are 3 big maggots that try to dive at Meat Boy. The trick is to get them to lunge towards you when you're near the buzzsaws, and those things will take care of them. Unfortunately, that's easier said than done, because to get them to jump at the ideal angle, you need to be in mid-air beside the saws, and the moving platform here coupled with the maggot's attack patterns makes it a daunting task. Okay, now I understand why the game recommends a controller instead of a keyboard. I'm getting cramps from holding down the shift key so much. I imagine holding a trigger button is easier than that. Anyway, once you complete this task, Dr. Fetus attempts to get away in a flying fortress, and Meat Boy latches on, leading us to World 6, the end. Normally you have to complete a certain number of levels in a world to unlock the boss, but in the end, you have to finish all 5 levels. And these levels are the most challenging obstacles the game has to throw at you. At least I think so. Your jumps will be even tighter, your movement needs to be faster, and your understanding of how the game works is put to the ultimate test. Many deaths will be had, controllers will be thrown, many deaths will be had, sanity will be questioned, you will die a lot. And after all that, you get the final boss of the game, Dr. Fetus himself. He gets so fed up with not being able to actually kill Meat Boy that he goes on a rampage with automatic scrolling buzzsaws and a tricky level to maneuver. At the end, you flip a switch and cause Dr. Fetus to fall through the ground, knocking him out of his suit. He makes one last-ditch effort to stop Meat Boy and Bandage Girl from escaping, which brings one last platforming challenge before the credits. When you make it to the end, Dr. Fetus' plan almost works, until, as I mentioned before, Brownie appears to save our 2 heroes. They escape, yada yada yada, game's over. Well, so remember that, or is it, I mentioned earlier? That brings us to World 7, Cotton Alley. This time you don't play as Meat Boy, you play as Bandage Girl. That's pretty neat. However, if you thought the end was stupendously hard, well, you ain't seen nothing yet. Cotton Alley, cutesy in name only, is 20 levels of pure, unadulterated agony. The tricky maneuvers you have to make, the combination of enemies and obstacles to make already difficult situations even more difficult, black maws, the combinations of obstacles, the tight jumps, the fast and slow pacing, the combinations of obstacles, it's all torture! I made it to level 20, but that level made me so frustrated that I finally gave up and moved on. These are the kinds of levels that you punish your friends with if they're giving you a hard time. These are the levels that you play when you want to feel nothing but pain and suffering. They're that hard. Oh, and that's not even it. If you get an A+ rank in any level in the main game, which you get by clearing the level under a certain time, you unlock that level's Dark World equivalent. What is the Dark World? As I lovingly put it, Super Meat Boy for super players. Thought it was hard already? Well, get ready to get kicked in the middle, because Dark World's here to prove you wrong. I also couldn't keep playing after a while because, quite frankly, I was tired of being a glutton for punishment. If you keep getting bandages and playing levels as best as you can, you're able to unlock other characters, but to be honest, I just couldn't take it anymore. The other characters, while they seem cool, just aren't worth torturing myself over, in my opinion. There's also Super Meat World, which, well, you got me. I'm guessing it was supposed to be for the online sharing mode of this game. However, it wouldn't work for me. I wonder if it just doesn't work on Mac. So that about concludes Super Meat Boy. Man, what an adventure that was. It was somewhat short in the long run, but it felt so stinking long because of how many times I died. At the end of my recording sessions, I had 801 deaths overall. Some of it was me not remembering how the game worked. Some of it was me thinking I could pull off something that I clearly couldn't. And some of it was me being impatient and not caring where the little sack of meat ended up. But in the end, it was worth the purchase. Super Meat Boy is one of those games you buy knowing it's going to give you a hard time. If you don't like brutally hard games, stay away from this one. But if you welcome a hard but fair challenge, Super Meat Boy is the game for you. To stick with platformers a bit but go a bit retro here, I've been playing a lot of Sonic CD lately, so I think it would be fun to get my thoughts out for that game and give it a proper review. So next time we meet, we're looking at, well, Sonic CD. Thanks so much for watching me suffer through Super Meat Boy. I look forward to making more consistent content throughout this year because I have some interesting videos planned for later on. If you like this one, please consider subscribing, liking, and clicking that bell icon so you don't miss my next release. See you next month!